Welcome back to another month of our Fresh Start by Revive podcast. We are thankful that you have joined in with us again. If this is your first time here, go ahead and go back and check out our other previous months. We started in September, and we've just been discussing topics and Bible verses and different things that are relevant to student ministry, to student workers, to students' parents, to students themselves. So if you are involved in student ministry in any capacity, whether that's a parent, a leader, a student yourself, whatever it may be, we got a lot of good content. We've been having a lot of fun, and this is just going to be month 8, another episode where we get to discuss some fun things about student ministry. And this month, we want to begin by talking about what it means to have practical faith. Oftentimes, we think of faith as just something that's very theoretical, and it's something that we do on Sunday mornings or have on Wednesday evenings, but there's no real practical element to it. But hopefully by the end of this episode, we will have a few ideas of how you can be more practical in your faith. But before we get started, since it's April and April 1st is today, if this is the first day you were listening with us that this was released, we thought how better off to talk about practical faith and in the month of April than telling some stories about how practical jokes that we have played have gone wrong. So we'll let Zach begin. I know he's got a good one in store for us, so go ahead and take us away, Zach.
Well, guys, I know you weren't in Brazil. And you weren't in Brazil, but John was there. And John, you might remember this. We had just gotten, it was like day 3, the last day that we're going to go out, and we're going to go see these kids in the favelas. And we had just gone through like security checkpoints. I mean, there's dudes walking around with AR-15s, M16s. This is the first time we've seen, okay, this is the real Brazil. And we pull up in our big charter bus, and Tara Duke, God bless her, she decided she needed to go to the bathroom in the back of the bus. There's that bathroom before we go in. Well, when she shuts the door, Brandon McEarl, who I look up to, man, Brandon's my guy. He said, "Hey, Zach," the door opened outwards. He said, "Hey, Zach, why don't you just lock her in there?" I was like, this is Brandon. He would never intentionally cause me harm, so I did it. She tries to come out. I got the size 15 shoe right in front of the door. She can't budge. She backs up. She hits it again. She doesn't come out. At this point, the handle starts like jiggling. She starts screaming, "Let me out!" I let her out. She comes out like Mike Tyson round 1. I mean, swinging. And it was at that point that I realized Brandon did not have my best interest at heart because Tara was in tears and swinging like Mike Tyson. So don't ever lock Tara in a bathroom. She's extremely claustrophobic. Found out the hard way.
I'm glad you told that story because I was having a hard time coming up with a practical joke that went wrong. But I remember this because I was about 2 rows in front of the bathroom, and I remember the commotion behind me. I thought something had happened. I thought somebody had come on the bus with us, really, at that point. And I just remember turning around and see her come out just, guns a-blazing.
Yeah,
she was fixing to take somebody out.
And that was me.
And the sad part is I'm sure McEarl knew.
Oh, he was laughing.
He knew what you were. He was setting you up when he was setting her.
There was 2 people in tears in that story. One is Tara. The other one was Brandon because he was laughing so hard.
He knew exactly what he was doing. But no, that's a good one. I remember that. That's good.
So growing up, I have always been about a good practical joke, and anybody who knew me growing up knew that they could expect something from me at some point, and that has in some aspects carried into adulthood. And I've just recently started on staff here at First Baptist Church. I've been here for about 9 months now, and after I had been here for about 3 or 4 months, I had been working on a little Word document, and I went to print it, and I accidentally printed it out backwards. I had clicked a little checkbox that said mirror, I believe it was, in Microsoft Word, and I went to print it because I was trying to figure out a different issue that was going on. I printed out, and everything printed out mirror. Everything was backwards. And I have a pretty good relationship with one of our secretaries. Her name's Dee, for those who don't know who we are, where we are. And Dee is our student ministry assistant, and she has been great. She's got a good sense of humor, and it's a really good thing that she has a good sense of humor because of how this went wrong. So she was out one time with her husband, and they were on vacation and away for a few days. So I thought it would be a funny idea to go into her computer and go into Microsoft Word into the settings and click reverse print. And then the idea was that when she got back on that next Tuesday or Wednesday that I'd ask her to print something and then it would print backwards, mirrored, and then we would laugh about it and say, haha, it was funny, and then just, be done with it, and she would fix it. Well, she gets in, and I ask her to print something backwards, or ask her to print something, and she goes to print it, and it doesn't print backwards. So I just assumed when I restarted the computer that the settings in Microsoft Word just went to their default. Well, about 3 months later, she is trying to print something out for our senior pastor for Wednesday night, and everything's printing out mirrored. And I didn't know this, and I come in the next day, it was a Thursday morning, and she goes, Clay, I finally figured out why in the world everything is printing out mirrored. And he goes, why? She said, there's this checkbox in Microsoft Word that's checked mirrored, and for some reason it caused my computer to print backwards. I don't know why it was checked, and they're like, oh, that's weird. And she goes, that must have been why when we printed the 100 colored copies that were 15 pages a piece for the missions banquet, all of those printed up backwards, and I was up here till midnight 2 different nights in tears because I couldn't figure out what was going on. So with my head down and my tail between my legs, I kind of walked out into the office and was like, yeah, D, 3 months ago when that happened, it's because I accidentally checked that box as a joke, and I didn't realize it wasn't going to happen, and I thought everything was done and over with. And it's a good thing that time does heal some wounds, because I probably would have lost my head if I told her that the next day after that September when all of that went wrong. So I thought it was just going to be a funny little thing, a little innocent, practical joke that gave a lot of heartache, stress, and tears in all of the process. So I'm just thankful, I still have a job, and, we're all getting along in the office. So.
I probably would have taken that to my grave.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd have said a word.
If you're keeping up, that's 1,500 pages of colored copies printed to be thrown away.
Yes.
So if you're watching this, we need you to type.
Like I say, I didn't have one, but y'all have had such great ones right there.
I don't
I'm
have
sure.
one either.
Matt, come
Nope.
on. Matt. Well, Matt's.
I mean, I
pretty
could
good
think of
live,
some
so.
that I've wanted to pull on
I'm
Ron, but
go-
it'd probably get me fired.
Have you ever pulled any on Rocky?
No.
I'm about to say, for those listening, Rocky's his older, larger brother. So if you if you did pull a joke on Rocky, you better be ready for the full wrath he's bringing. And if any joke or practical joke that involved Ryan involved glitter, you're probably right. That you probably would have lost your job in the process.
Your little box and say, I'm out.
I don't even have a box.
So we've had a good time talking about a couple stories that have gone wrong, some practical jokes that have gone wrong, even when we thought they would be funny. They didn't turn out so funny in the long run. And so we're going to get ready to jump in here into just the meat of what we wanted to talk about today, about having practical faith. And before we do that, I want to take a second to define what the word practical means. In the dictionary, it tells us that the word practical means that it is an idea or an action that is more about the action of something rather than the theory behind something. It is when you are getting down and dirty that you're willing to get your hands dirty, to get in the mud and do something about what you're talking about, rather than just sitting in a classroom or, in a circle around a fire, drinking hot coffee one night, talking about deep thoughts somewhere. It's practical is about doing things. And that's exactly who Jesus was and what Jesus was about. In his ministry, we do see that he goes and he talks with priests and other teachers in the synagogue and has some talks about theory, but his whole ministry was based around the idea of having practical faith and being a practical person. So we thought, we could sit here and, talk about some principles about what it means to be practical, but what a better way to talk about how Jesus was practical and how we can be like him than just giving 4 tips on how you as a student, you as a parent, a leader, someone who is discipling students could be practical in your faith, in your context, at your work, at your school, on your sports team. Just 4 tips on how you can have practical faith. And that the first step in having practical faith, Matt is going to share with us.
The first step in having practical faith is serving, and most times we look at serving and we're just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to jump into serving. I don't know what to serve in. I don't know what I'm good in. And going back to a few things, like a thing that we did in our Sunday school class, and John knows about this, we did a what was it, spiritual
spiritual
gift test?
gifts test, yeah, a couple weeks ago.
And mine came back as my highest was serving, faith, and evangelism. And anyone in this room knows that that's my 3 highest, and my lowest is teaching. And going back to that is, I didn't know where to start in serving. Where I did start was the sound committee. And I've been there for 5 to 6 years now, and I've grown, and now I'm like, you guys don't realize this, but I'm the guy behind the editing of the podcast and everything else, and what goes out on social media. And me wondering what I was gonna do in service, and wondering what I was gonna do, ended up being a big part of the church, being a big behind the scenes part that you never see, but on social media, and you never get the recognition for it. And that's a part of serving, and that's something that you just got to get used to, is you're not always going to be recognized. And that's one thing that you're going to step up and realize, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I'm getting recognized or not. It's service, and it's going to God. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that, no matter where you're serving at, like, I felt God calling me to do whatever. And I didn't realize I'd be sitting here editing as much as I have and put thousands and thousands of hours into it. And that's where I'm at now.
I think that's a really good example of just being willing to serve. Maybe you don't know where you should. Just look at a need, jump into it. And, it may not be the most glorious place to serve. You may not get all the recognition, but I think that's a really key principle about Jesus' ministry and how he was practical. And I think of the story about how at the end of his life, before he is going to go to the cross and give up his life, that he's having a dinner with all of his closest disciples, and he begins that dinner by washing their feet. And I don't think in Jesus' mind at any point did he ever think, man, I'm going to get a lot of recognition for washing these bums' feet. They're dirty, they're nasty, they've been walking in sandals in the dirt and mud all day. That's not what Jesus is about. He was just about seeing a need and serving in that, and I think that's a really good example of how we can be like Jesus. Like you said, just jump into something. Even if you're not recognized, there's an important role to fill, and that you can do a great job in serving, even if you don't get the recognition that other positions or other places might have that recognition.
And one note for you, Matt, I know we've served together now, like you say, for probably close to 6 years between our audio-video committees and different things. And I'll just say the growth that I've seen from you because of that, yes, because of stepping out and serving, and then God taking that servant heart that you have and then opened other doors for you has led to a lot of things too.
Yeah, it opens doors. I never thought I'd be a fan of editing or doing camera stuff. Now I'm like, let's do more of it.
Yeah, that's right.
So we have one way to be practical is by serving, and we have another one that John is going to talk about here.
Sure. So another area that we talk about when we talk about being practical in our faith is by submitting. And I'm going to read a couple of verses here just to kind of bring this in from the Bible here. One in John chapter 6, verse 38 says, "For I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me." And then over in 1 Corinthians 11:1, Paul tells us to be imitators of me as I am of Christ. And I think that's something that when we're talking about being practical in our faith is by submitting, is by taking whatever God is giving to us and submitting that and giving that back to him. It also leads to guiding other folks to follow you. And I think that's something that we talk about a lot here, and is a very big part of our ministry and our Sunday school ministry and what we're all involved in, and that's discipleship. I think, us submitting then shows and leads others to doing that same thing, and it teaches others how to submit their lives, submit their wants, submit what they want to do to actually following God's will for their lives and actually doing what He's called for them to do. And to me, that's an area that is very important when you're talking about trying to be practical in your faith, is submitting yourself to God and then allowing Him to work in you so that you can follow the will He has for your life.
I think that's a very key part of the Christian walk, is being willing to follow. There's so many people who want to jump right into leadership roles and But before you can truly lead, you have to be first willing to follow and be a disciple of someone else so you can learn how to lead, learn how to do practical things in ministry. And when you allow yourself to submit to someone else, even though that can be a difficult part, we're all guys sitting around here and we all have some pride that, we probably live our lives in, and submitting to someone else is not always the easiest thing to do, but it's very important and a very practical thing we can do in having our faith.
Man, we were at a church camp back when we used to go to Fuge, and we had just had a student surrender to the ministry. And the camp pastor, we had him the year before, and he was going to go into law enforcement until the Lord called him out of it. And so I was walking through one day, and he goes, "Man, you're a cop, aren't you?" Cops can pick out other cops. And so the year before, we had made a connection. And so this next year, he's sitting at supper with me and the kid who had just surrendered to the ministry. And this guy tells him, he said, "Man, I just surrendered to the ministry." And this goes along with what y'all are talking about. And he said, "What are you excited about?" He goes, "Man, I'm so excited to lead." He said, "Before you can lead, you have to follow."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Before you ever lead, make sure you follow." And then he said, "When you go home, find ways to follow." He said, "Man, when you're in the parking lot, pick up trash."
Yep.
He said, "That is where ministry starts."
Yep. To be willing to submit and to follow others who are already in the faith and who are already seasoned veterans. I think that's a really good truth. So we can grow in our faith and have be more practical in our faith by serving, by submitting. And another way we can be practical in our faith is by shepherding or by leading. So we just talked about following, and following then moves to leading. So how are we practical in our leading? How are we practical in our shepherding? And I think a very key verse in Scripture. It's really small, and there's not a lot of, maybe attention to it necessarily. But in Matthew 6:9, right before that, we see all of the disciples talking about prayer, and Jesus is talking about prayer, and he's telling them all the ways that, prayer is good and how they can honor God by it. But he doesn't just leave them hanging by talking about the principles of prayer. He said, the Bible tells us in Matthew 6:9, then he showed them how to pray. And that's when we go into the Lord's Prayer. And I think that's a very key aspect of Jesus' ministry, is that he was practical in his faith by serving, and he was practical in his faith by leading by example. And he didn't just say, "Hey, you need to learn how to pray," and then left him on a cliffhanger. He said, "You need to learn how to pray, and since I'm your leader, I'm the one you are being discipled by, I'm going to not only tell you you need to learn how to pray, but I'm going to show you how to pray." And so he walked step by step with them of the Lord's Prayer, something that we still recite today. And I think in our own lives, if you're a student out there or a parent or whatever it may be, a very key way of leading in your faith is by leading by example. How you live your life, how your kids watch you speak to your spouse or other people and students, how your friends watch you interact with your parents or other friends, how you react on the sports field when a play doesn't go your way or you feel like you've been wronged. Are you the kid who is going to just stand up, accept what happened, and move on and do better the next play? Or are you the one who throws a tantrum on the court or on the field and makes a big deal about it and storms off and cusses, and then you end up running 50 line sprints the next day at practice because your coach was upset with you? And if we want to be practical shepherds, if we want to be practical leaders, we have to choose to first set the example to other people, because there is no way that we are going to win others to Jesus if they don't look at our own lives and wonder, why is he different? If they look at us and think, "Man, he is exactly like me, there is no difference in him, the way that he leads, the way that he talks, the way that he acts is no different than me," why would others want to have this relationship with Jesus that we talk about is so life transforming and changing when there is no transformation or change in our own life and we aren't leading by example? So I think that's another key aspect of Jesus' ministry that is something that we can embody ourselves in our day-to-day walk.
Yeah, and I'll just, as somebody that's got 3 kids at home, I can attest to this. Leading is only as good as how you show them how to actually do something. Because I can tell them all day how to do something, but if they don't see me actually show them that, it doesn't actually resonate with them. They don't actually get anywhere with it. And I think that's something we struggle with sometimes, is we expect people to just know how to do something or to just know how to carry themselves. But they don't unless we're actually leading them through that and showing them the way. And I think that's a big part of showing practical faith, is that leading people through it and showing there and being there. And then not only showing them how to do that, but then being that example too, like you said.
So we can have practical faith by serving, by submitting, by shepherding. And lastly, Zach is going to wrap us up here.
So the last way that we can have practical faith is by sharing our story. And in Matthew 16:21, it says, "From then on, Jesus began to point out to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders, chief priests, and scribes, be killed, and be raised on the third day." Now, obviously, Jesus had the benefit of knowing what was going to happen. But we can share our story and really help people. While Matt, you were talking, I was kind of thinking ahead about what was going on here, and I was scrolling through. If you know me, you know I love quotes. I mean, I have an entire notes page on my phone of quotes, and God put one that I had in here on my phone, on my mind, and it said, the quote is by Levi Lusko. And if you know anything about Levi Lusko, he's lost a daughter. I mean, terrible things, and he has rallied, and he's an incredible preacher, man of God, author. And one thing that he says is, God often deposits things within you that people in the future will desperately need. That's from his book, Through the Eyes of a Lion. And I think about my story. You know, my story is, my mom died on my 9th birthday. I cannot tell you how many times I've sat beside somebody that's going through, doesn't have to be losing a parent, but just losing somebody, and saying, look, I know this is tough now, but don't isolate yourself. Lean on people around you. Dive in Scripture. You're going to sit there and you're going to say, when someone comes up to you and say, what do you need? You're not going to know what you need, but just know that they're there for you. Things like that, man. Our stories, and they're all different. We're all on a battlefield. The battlefield might look differently for you than it does for me, but it's all the same battle. We're all waking up every day and fighting this thing we call sin. We're all on different battlefields, but it's the same battle. And our stories, our past, in those moments, it stinks. But in the future, there's going to be somebody that needs you, that you're going to be able to lock arms with and say, look, Jesus is the only way I got through this, and let me show you what he taught me through this.
There have been many times in my own life where I've faced some heartache and some difficult circumstances, and I think you're very right that God has placed those things in our lives to share to others, and I can think of several times and stories as well where those moments of difficulty, heartache, have come to full circle with other people that I can share the gospel with, or just kind of wrap your arms around and say, hey man, you're not in this alone. And that goes so far in our faith, to show other people that we care, to show other people that we're concerned with them, and not just that we want to hit them over the head with the Bible, but there is something about our faith that can help heal them and help guide them in a direction that maybe we didn't go or we did go, to help them get through whatever they are going through.
Well, I think what Zach said is so important. You can't withhold that because it's difficult. I know sharing your story is not easy. It's hard. It's a hard story to share. But the importance of being able to share that with somebody else that's going through that is so big. And you have to realize that while it still hurts, you're helping so many other people with that too.
Yeah,
so.
The pain never goes away.
Sure.
It just gets more bearable.
Sure.
And that's with anybody's story, because we all have a past. We all have things that have happened. But like you just said, man, just talking. There's healing in talking, whether it's with yourself or with the person you're talking to.
That's right.
So we've seen 4 ways that we can have practical faith. That's by serving and doing deeds and service to other people, getting plugged into a local church, serving the church by submitting to those who have been in ministry for a long time, submitting yourself and following others, by shepherding, by leading when you have come to a place where you are ready to lead, that you can do that in a practical way, and also just simply by sharing your story. And I think those are 4 key aspects that Jesus had in his ministry that if we are willing to embody ourselves, our faith can go a long way. Because oftentimes, I think in our lives and the people around us, they think that going to church is just a routine we do, or our faith or that we proclaim in God is just a theory or an idea that could be one of many possibilities. And it isn't until our words meet our hands and we do things practically in our faith that people really get to see the full picture of the gospel and what Jesus' ministry really meant to us and meant to this world while he was here. And we can see lives change if we are willing to just be practical in our faith and not just theoretical in our faith. So we've had a moment to talk about some practical jokes that went wrong. We've had a little time to talk about Jesus and his life and how we can be more practical in our faith. But lastly, we just want to talk to some questions, answer some questions for you guys. We got 4 good questions this week, and we'll kick us off with John. He's going to answer the question for us. What is the best practical life hack you have ever learned?
So I've learned a lot of practical life hacks, but a couple of things that I've learned that have saved me a lot of heartache and a lot of struggle. One is I am not very mechanically oriented. I'm not very good at putting things together, and I'm really not good at taking them apart. And we used to have an old set of bunk beds that we had to move to a different room about 4 times, and I stripped about 10 of the screws out. And what I found is if you take a rubber band and put it in the screw and then put the screwdriver on the rubber band, it will unscrew it and it will come out. And that saved me a lot of heartache from moving those around. Second thing that's pretty good, my kids all love to eat popcorn. They love it, microwave popcorn. But if y'all know, most of the time when you pop popcorn, all the kernels don't get popped, and you end up with some small seeds, right? And if you just grab a bite, what happens? You bite down on one, it hurts.
It does not feel good.
If you will just barely open it and shake it, those seeds will come out, and then you can just pour the rest of it in the bowl, and then you don't have to worry about eating those anymore.
We eat popcorn probably almost every night between Kirsty and I, so we're going to have to try that. I think that's a pretty good life hack.
Barely open it and just shake it, all the seeds will end up, the unpopped kernels will come out, and then you can just put the rest in the bowl. You don't have to worry about it.
That's a good one.
So there you go. There's a couple. I'm sure y'all probably got a lot more too.
So the next question we're going to answer is, who in your life has been the greatest influence on you? For myself, that has, at least in a general aspect, has been my mother. I feel like I relate to Timothy oftentimes. In Timothy's story, it was his mother and grandmother who led him to faith in Jesus, and that is part of my own story, that my mother and grandmother were the spiritual leaders in our family, and that's the reason why I was able to come to know Jesus as my Lord and Savior. That's a big reason why I'm serving where I'm serving today, is because that many years ago they were faithful, even when others in my family weren't, to bring me to church, to get me involved, and to see me come to have a relationship with Jesus. I would say in more recent times, a big influence on my life has been our other student pastor, Ryan. If for many of you don't know, although I do have an office down the hall from Ryan, 98% of my day is really spent in his office because I'm an extreme extrovert and it just kills me not to be around people throughout the day. So maybe he gets annoyed with that sometimes. I don't know. He hasn't told me that yet. He hasn't kicked me out yet, so maybe that's a good sign. But he's been really a great person to be able to follow, to be able to learn how to do ministry, someone who's been at this church for over 10 years now, I guess, and doing a great job. So I've just been really thankful for that mentorship and for him in my life, and just how he's been able to influence me in a lot of great ways. So we learned from John, what a great life hack you've learned, something practical. For myself, the greatest influence in my life. And the next question from good old Zach is, what is the weirdest thing you have found or, quote, refound while spring cleaning?
All right, y'all. Students, you're going to learn this. Your parents can relate. Everyone sitting around this table can relate. When you go to college, you go with like a carload. If you're like me, you go with half a carload. You come back with like 3 carloads. That's just how it is. One year, myself and my other roommates were cleaning out our dorm. And I was lucky enough, blessed enough to be surrounded by solid Christian guys. We ended up just sticking it out 3 of the 4 years we were there. And that's important at the end of the story, because this one spring, we're cleaning out the dorm, and we find this picture. It's of none of us. It's of like this. It's of like this picture from like 1950s to 1970s of like a middle school age black girl
This keeps
that we had accumulated from. There was a thrift shop in McKenzie, and I'm sure we just like picked it up there. And on the back of the frame was the name Peaches, so her name was Peaches. And once we found that picture, every room we went to after that, and then eventually our house that we had my senior year, Peaches was the first thing you saw when you came in the door. So I don't know who ended up with Peaches, but that was probably the craziest thing I've ever found spring cleaning.
It sounds like it's a good thing that thing died while it was at college and went away, and that you don't have it. Because I can just see one day, you're getting married and you're like, hey, honey, what can I put on? I got it. We're putting Peaches on the front door.
Peaches.
That is not a wreath, not a flat Peaches. That's our front door hanger. So what an interesting re-find of spring cleaning, weird re-find. All right, so lastly here, what is something that you do that helps you prioritize serving God, Matt?
Daily reminders. Like, if like one thing that I used to have was my wallpaper. Every time it would pop up, it would have a cross, and above the cross, it would say, "Remember why you do this." And I mean, if you're not in ministry, if you are in ministry, you could do the same thing. Just get you daily reminders, get you a wallpaper, get you something. If you get in your car, like whenever you get in your car every day, have something that's posted on your dash, have something in your bathroom whenever you're getting ready, have something in your office. Just a daily reminder of why you do what you do. And if you're not in ministry, just have scripture and have scripture posted all over the place.
I think that might even be a good tip for parents. Remember why you do what you do.
Yes.
Like parents of teenagers and students, we know that you are fighting a tough battle and you're going through a lot. So maybe that encouragement is good for parents and leaders as well who are in student ministry. So we are very thankful again that you've chose to join us this month for Fresh Start by Revive. We're thankful to have John Bingham, the one and only, join us in lieu of Ryan.
I appreciate you letting me sit in here. Ryan's got a lot on his plate right now, so I'm thankful to be able to sit here. Thankful to be able to sit with these three guys. They're doing some great work here, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be with them.
Can you give us a good .com before we sign off?
Yeah, I can give you one. Helmsmotor.com.
Hey, there we go. That's the John we know and love. So again, thank you for joining us. This is just another fun episode here at Fresh Start by Revive. We hope to get to see you next month.